For 40 days and nights, Moses stood in the thick darkness that covered Mount Sinai, a darkness that burned with uncreated light. Thunder rolled above the mountain like the heartbeat of heaven. Lightning flashed like living fire, and within that holy storm, God spoke. His voice was not like the wind. It was the wind. It shook the stones, it split the silence, and it carved eternity into the heart of a man. There, in the mountain that trembled beneath divine presence, Moses received a command unlike any other. "Make for me a sanctuary," the voice said, "that I may dwell among them." The heavens themselves leaned toward the earth in that moment. No mortal had ever been asked to build a throne for the invisible. No hand of clay had ever been chosen to carry the presence of the eternal. And so, from the mouth of God came precise instructions, blueprints of gold and mercy. "Build it of acacia wood," he said. "Overlay it with pure gold, inside and out. Make a crown of gold around it." Then came the most mysterious detail of all. "Place upon it 2 cherubim, facing one another. Their wings shall overshadow the mercy seat. There I will meet with you." Each word carved a covenant between heaven and earth. The ark would be more than a relic, it would be a portal of divine presence, a living testimony of God's law and mercy united. Inside it would rest the tablets of the covenant, Aaron's budding staff, and manna, symbols of power, priesthood, and provision. When Moses descended the mountain, the people could not even look at his face. It shone with light not of this world. Behind his glowing countenance, he carried the first shadow of heaven on earth, the vision of the ark that would soon walk among men. The journey of the ark had begun, but none could yet comprehend what it would bring. Glory, victory, judgment, and disappearance. A mystery that would haunt kings, prophets, and nations for centuries to come. What if the ark was never lost, only hidden? Don't blink. The truth is deeper than history dares to tell. Subscribe and follow this series as we trace the forbidden path of the Ark of the Covenant. The desert stretched endlessly, but at its center stood something holy, a tent unlike any other, the tabernacle, built from divine instructions, wrapped in gold and woven linen. It shimmered beneath the desert sun like a living flame among the sands. At its heart rested the ark. 2 cherubim faced each other above it, wings outstretched, touching at the center, their gaze fixed upon the invisible space between them. That empty space was not empty at all. It was the meeting point between heaven and earth. It was where God would speak. When the priests carried the ark into the Holy of Holies, silence fell across the camp. Every hammer stopped, every voice stilled. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. For in that moment, the presence descended. A pillar of cloud filled the tent. Thunder rolled softly like a whisper of eternity. Light radiated from within, and the priests fell to their knees. It was no longer a box of gold. It had become the throne of God among men. Day after day, the ark became the compass of Israel. When the cloud lifted, the people moved. When it settled, they stopped. The presence of God led them, not through maps or stars, but through glory itself. At night, the cloud turned to fire, glowing over the tabernacle like a beacon in the wilderness. It was a light that told them they were not alone, a reminder that heaven still walked with them. But the ark was not just a symbol of comfort. It was also a warning. Any who approached without reverence faced death. For the same glory that gave life could also consume. Moses would enter the tent to speak with God, and the people would watch from afar. When he emerged, his face would shine so brightly that they begged him to cover it with a veil. It was the reflection of a light not born of the sun, the echo of a presence too holy for human eyes. Through the ark, the Eternal had chosen to dwell among the temporal. Through gold and wood, mercy and law stood side by side, judgment tempered by grace. The camp of Israel became a moving sanctuary, a people led not by a king, but by a presence. Every step in the wilderness marked by divine fire and unspoken fear. For in their midst the glory of God lived, unseen yet undeniable, resting between the wings of cherubim, carried upon human shoulders. The ark was no longer a command. It was now the heartbeat of a nation. The wilderness had shaped them, a nation forged in the fire of obedience and trial. But now Israel stood at the threshold of destiny. The Jordan River lay before them, its waters deep and wild, cutting between promise and fulfillment. And at the center of the camp, the ark waited silent, radiant, alive. When Joshua stood before the people, his voice trembled not with fear, but with reverence. He pointed toward the priests bearing the ark and declared, "Behold, the living God is among you, and he will drive out your enemies before you." The command came simple yet divine. When the soles of the priests' feet touch the waters, the river will stand still. And so it happened. As the carriers of the ark stepped into the flood, the roaring Jordan froze in place. Waters piled high like a wall, trembling in awe of the presence that walked among men. The people passed through on dry ground, not by sword, not by might, but by the invisible power that radiated from that sacred chest of gold. The ark had spoken without words. It had declared war on chaos itself. Days later, they stood before the towering walls of Jericho, a fortress said to be unbreakable. Its gates sealed, its soldiers mocking. But Joshua had received a command that defied every rule of war. "Do not raise a weapon," the Lord said. "March around the city. Carry the ark before you." So for 6 days, they circled the city, silent, steady, relentless. Only the soft hum of the shofar broke the air. Behind it, the ark moved, gleaming under the sun, the wings of the cherubim catching light like living fire. To Jericho's soldiers it looked like madness. To heaven it was obedience. On the 7th day, at the 7th circle, the silence broke. The trumpets roared, the people shouted, and the walls, every stone, every gate, every tower crumbled into dust. The ark had not moved, yet kingdoms fell before it. It was not a weapon of man. It was the throne of the Almighty marching through history. As Israel advanced, the ark became the banner of their battles. When it led, they triumphed. When it was neglected, they fell. The nations began to whisper of it. Kings feared its name. Even the Philistines, mighty and cruel, trembled when they heard that the ark had entered the camp of Israel. "The gods have come among them," they cried. But the ark was not a charm, it was a covenant. And those who carried it without purity learned that divine power is never to be used, only obeyed. In one battle, Israel rushed forward with pride, carrying the ark as if it were a trophy of old victories. But their hearts were far from the God who dwelt above it. And so, the unimaginable happened. The ark was captured. That day, silence fell upon Israel like a grave. The glory had departed. The priests were slain. And the people wept, crying out, "Ichabod, the glory has left us." Yet, even in defeat, the ark did not lose its power. It had merely changed location. The throne of God had entered enemy territory not as a prisoner, but as a conqueror unseen. For wherever the ark went, glory followed or judgment. Its presence tore down walls, silenced rivers, and revealed the truth of every heart it touched. It was the visible proof that God walked with men, and the terrifying reminder that he would not be mocked. The Ark of the Covenant was not an object. It was a declaration that the Creator himself had chosen to dwell among creation, and that no kingdom of stone, no army of flesh, could stand against his presence. The battlefield was quiet now. Smoke rose from shattered tents, and the cries of Israel faded into the wind. The unthinkable had happened. The Ark of God had been captured. The Philistines, fierce and triumphant, carried it away as a trophy of war. Their warriors sang of victory. Their priests shouted to Dagon, the god of grain and storm. To them it was proof that their gods had conquered Israel's. But the ark was never a prisoner. It was a storm hidden in silence. They carried it into the temple of Dagon in the city of Ashdod. There, they set it beside the massive stone idol of their god, a figure with a man's body and a fish's head, towering over the room. Torches flickered. The priests bowed. The air smelled of victory and incense. Then the night fell. By dawn, the laughter had died. When the priests entered the temple the next morning, they stopped cold. Dagon was lying face down before the ark. The idol that once towered above the golden chest now bowed before it, as though in worship. The priests rushed to lift their god back up. They spoke no word of it, but fear crept into their hearts. That night they sealed the doors again. But when morning came, Dagon had fallen once more. This time, his head and hands were broken upon the threshold, shattered before the ark of the Lord. The Philistines began to whisper. Their victory was turning to dread. Then the plagues began. Tumors broke out on their skin. Rats infested their homes. Everywhere the ark went, death followed. From Ashdod to Gath to Ekron, the people cried, "Send it away, for the hand of Israel's God is heavy upon us." The once proud cities trembled before an unseen presence. Priests of Dagon fell sick. Children wailed. Even the air felt different, heavy, sacred, unbearable. The same presence that parted seas and shattered walls now haunted their streets. After 7 months of terror, the Philistine lords gathered in desperation. "We cannot keep it," they said. "Let us return it with offerings of gold, that his wrath may turn away." They placed the ark upon a new cart, drawn by 2 cows that had never been yoked. The animals were set free without guidance, their calves taken from them. If the ark returned to Israel on its own, they said, they would know this plague was divine. The people watched as the cart began to move. The cows, lowing softly, turned not left nor right. They walked straight toward the border of Israel, never stopping, never swerving, as if led by an invisible hand. Behind them trailed silence, the kind that follows fear after it bows to awe. The ark returned home, but Israel was not ready to touch what they had once taken for granted. When men of Beth Shemesh approached it carelessly and lifted the lid, 70 of them fell dead. The people cried out again, "Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God?" The ark was no longer a sign of pride or ownership. It was a revelation, a throne that answered arrogance with truth. The Philistines learned that no idol could stand before it. Israel learned that no man could touch it without fear. And both learned that the presence of God cannot be controlled, only revered. The ark rested for years in the house of Abinadab, guarded in silence, awaiting the heart that would carry it with both fear and love, the heart of a king named David. But that story, of passion, worship, and tragedy, would belong to the next chapter. Years had passed since the ark's capture. It rested quietly in the house of Abinadab, on a hill in Kiriath Jearim. There, it remained untouched, guarded by priests, wrapped in silence, hidden from the noise of nations. The glory that once marched before Israel now waited, patient as eternity. Then came David, the shepherd king, warrior and psalmist of Israel, a man after God's own heart. He had conquered armies, united tribes, and taken Jerusalem as his throne. But there was still something missing, the presence. The Ark of the Covenant was not in Zion, and David could not rest until it was. He summoned 30,000 chosen men of Israel. Drums rolled across the valleys, trumpets sounded, and the people gathered in a sea of joy. They sang psalms, danced in circles, and lifted banners high as the ark was brought out from the house of Abinadab. The oxen pulled a new cart, its golden burden gleaming beneath the sun. The road was filled with music and laughter. Cymbals clashed, harps sang. David himself danced before the Lord with all his strength, his royal robes flying like fire in the wind. He was not a king that day, he was a worshiper. But joy without reverence is dangerous ground. As the cart rolled over the rough path, one of the oxen stumbled. The ark shook, and Uzzah, one of the men guiding it, reached out to steady it with his hand. The moment his fingers touched the ark, lightning struck from heaven. He fell instantly. The music stopped. The drums fell silent. The joy turned to terror. David froze. His heart broke. He cried out, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" That day, David learned what all before him had discovered. The ark was not a symbol of victory, nor a relic of history. It was the living presence of a holy God. And holiness is not tamed by celebration. The procession stopped. David ordered the ark to be taken aside to the house of Obed-Edom, a humble Levite from Gath. And there it remained for 3 months. But where the ark rested, blessing followed. Obed-Edom's home flourished. His fields yielded more than ever. Peace filled his household, and joy overflowed in his family. News reached David. The Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom because of the ark of God. This time David approached differently. No carts, no pride. He gathered priests, consecrated them, and had the ark carried on shoulders as the law commanded. Each step they took, they stopped after 6 paces and offered sacrifice, blood, smoke, and praise rising into the sky. The city erupted in celebration once again, but this time reverence danced with joy. Trumpets blared. People sang. David leapt before the ark, clothed in a simple linen garment, no crown, no armor, just worship. When they reached Jerusalem, the ark was brought into the city of David with shouts and trumpets. The people wept and rejoiced all at once, for the presence had returned. David placed the ark in a tent prepared for it and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. Then he blessed the people in the name of God Almighty and distributed bread, meat, and wine to all. That night, as the music faded and the stars filled the sky above Jerusalem, David stood before the ark in quiet awe. He had danced, wept, and bowed before the same presence that once shattered nations. He understood now that the ark was not a trophy of faith. It was the throne of the one who rules beyond all thrones. And though the ark had found a resting place, the story was not yet complete. For one day, a greater temple would rise, and the ark would be carried again, not by men but by destiny itself. Years had passed since David danced before the ark. The shepherd king had grown old. He had dreamed of building a house for God, a place of permanence for the presence he once carried through the streets of Jerusalem. But the Lord had said, "You shall not build my house, for you have shed much blood. Your son shall build it in your stead." And so, when David rested with his fathers, the task passed to his son, Solomon, a man of peace and wisdom, chosen to complete the dream. The day dawned clear and golden over Jerusalem. The new temple, vast, radiant, and flawless, stood atop Mount Moriah, gleaming with pure gold and cedar. Its walls shimmered in the sun. Its doors were carved with palm trees and cherubim, each detail a reflection of heaven's design. It was no longer a tent wandering through the wilderness. It was a kingdom's crown, a monument to the covenant. Trumpets blared from the temple courts. Priests assembled in white linen, their voices rising like waves of praise. At their center, covered in reverent cloth, rested the Ark of the Covenant, the throne of the living God, still radiant, still untouchable. Solomon himself, clothed in royal splendor, stood at the forefront. Tens of thousands watched in silence as the priests lifted the ark onto their shoulders. Step by step, they carried it up the hill of Zion. Slowly, solemnly, as golden rays broke through the clouds and poured upon the scene like divine approval. When they entered the inner court, the people bowed low. The priests carried the ark into the Holy of Holies, behind the great veil of blue and scarlet. There, beneath wings of massive golden cherubim stretching from wall to wall, they placed it upon the stone foundation prepared by Solomon himself. and then they stepped back. The chamber was sealed. A hush swept through the temple like the pause before creation. Suddenly it came, a sound like rushing wind, a glow brighter than lightning. The cloud of the Lord's presence filled the temple, thick, living, and uncontainable. The priests could no longer stand to minister. They fell to their faces as the building trembled with the weight of divine glory. Outside, Solomon raised his hands toward heaven and cried, "The Lord has said he would dwell in thick darkness, but I have built you a house, a place for you to abide forever." The people erupted in worship. Sacrifices burned on the altars. Trumpets and cymbals collided in harmony as fire fell from heaven and consumed the offering. The crowd gasped. Some shouted, others wept, for the presence had come to rest again among men. That day Israel reached its spiritual height. The ark, once carried through deserts and wars, now rested beneath wings of gold. From this point on, every prayer, every offering, every hope of the nation centered upon that sacred place. The Holy of Holies, where mercy met judgment, and where God himself chose to dwell. But even in glory, a shadow lingered. Solomon's wisdom would fade into pride. The people's devotion would drift into idolatry. And though the temple stood firm in gold and stone, the hearts of men would begin to crumble. The ark remained, silent, patient, watching, until the day when sin would once again drive out the presence it carried. For glory can dwell among men, but not where pride builds its throne. The ark's golden age had arrived, and its fall was soon to follow. The golden age had dimmed. What was once a nation led by prophets and kings had become divided, Judah in the south, Israel in the north. The temple still stood upon Mount Moriah, but its courts were no longer filled with pure praise. Incense burned to foreign gods. Idols crept into the holy city. And though the ark remained behind the veil, its silence was no longer peace. It was warning. Prophets cried out in the streets. Jeremiah wept until his eyes burned dry. He warned them again and again. The glory that dwells among us will depart if we do not return to the Lord. But they mocked him. They trusted the gold of the temple more than the God who filled it. Then came the day no one thought possible. The Babylonian armies surrounded Jerusalem like a storm of iron. The temple trembled under the sound of siege. Smoke darkened the skies. Priests were slaughtered. The walls fell and the city burned. Nebuchadnezzar's soldiers stormed into the holy place. They stripped the gold from the altars, tore the curtains, and carried away every vessel of silver and bronze. But when they reached the Holy of Holies, the place where the ark had always stood, they found it empty. The throne of God was gone. No scripture records the moment it vanished. No prophet witnessed its removal. One night it was there, resting beneath the cherubim, and by morning it had disappeared into mystery. Some say the priests, warned by Jeremiah, took the ark and hid it before the Babylonians entered the city. Ancient traditions whisper that he carried it to Mount Nebo, the same mountain where Moses once looked into the Promised Land. There, beneath a hidden chamber, the ark was sealed within stone, buried until the day God calls for it again. Others claim the ark journeyed south, across deserts and kingdoms, until it reached Ethiopia, carried by the son of Solomon and the queen of Sheba, and protected by generations of priests in a temple where no one may enter but one. To this day, the monks of Aksum guard that temple, swearing that within it lies the true ark, unseen, untouched, alive. Still others believe it was hidden beneath the Temple Mount itself, sealed deep within the earth, beneath chambers no man dares disturb, waiting for the day when the true temple will rise once more. Wherever it went, the message remained the same. God's presence could not be captured, controlled, or contained. When the hearts of men turned to idols, his throne departed, not in defeat, but in sovereignty. The ark's disappearance was not loss. It was judgment wrapped in mercy, for the people would now seek not gold, but grace. not a box of covenant, but the covenant himself, the living word who would one day dwell among men again, not in temples made by hands, but in flesh and spirit. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Yet the ark's silence endured, a mystery buried in both time and prophecy. And though no man has seen it since, John the Apostle, exiled on the island of Patmos, wrote of a vision. Then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen the ark of his covenant. The ark may have left the earth, but it was never lost. Its story did not end. It simply ascended. The ark disappeared from human sight, but its echo lives in every altar, every prayer, and every heart that seeks the presence of the divine. It waits, as prophecy waits, for the day when the veil will be torn again, and the throne of God will return not in gold, but in glory. The ark was gone from sight, but not from heaven's plan. Its silence on earth became an echo in eternity, a whisper of what was, and what is yet to come. For the ark of the covenant was never merely wood and gold. It was a shadow of the eternal, a divine blueprint of something far greater. In heaven, there is no temple made by hands. Yet John, exiled on the island of Patmos, wrote of a moment that silenced the stars. Then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen within it. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled, and once more the ark appeared not upon earth, but within the throne room of heaven itself. What Moses once saw in vision on Sinai, what Solomon mirrored in stone, was only a reflection of that heavenly reality. The ark had always been more than a relic. It was the meeting point of mercy and judgment, the throne where justice kissed compassion. Inside it lay the three witnesses of covenant, the tablets of the law, representing God's truth, the rod of Aaron, symbolizing divine authority, and the jar of manna, testifying to God's provision. Together they formed a perfect triad: law, priesthood, and sustenance, all pointing toward a greater fulfillment, the Messiah himself. For in Christ, the law was written not on stone, but on hearts. The priesthood found its perfection not in Aaron, but in the eternal high priest. And the manna became flesh, the bread of life given for the world. Thus, the ark's meaning unfolded across the ages. What once dwelt in shadow now lives in spirit. What once was carried by Levites is now carried by faith.